Yay, then we begin. Hello everyone, welcome to Midweek Gaming. I'm Nick. Over there on the other side of the comms is Justin, providing entertainment and side commentary, as always. And
Yes,
I am, of course, Nick, your other host, co-host thing. The person that
one
directs the
of
show.
two hosts.
One of two hosts, one of half. I am half the whole. Regardless, today we are going to be talking about something that was something we planned for a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean like a few days ago. So,
Well, not
kind of.
exactly a few days ago,
Okay.
but
But
still.
yeah. So last week you may have heard me kind of mention how PlayStation Direct or PlayStation State of Play, yeah, that's what they're calling it these days, came out. Yeah, no, it's PlayStation State of Play and Nintendo Direct. I'm getting my naming conventions mixed up. Ever since everyone went to digital and started doing their own thing, I have to keep track of what every company is calling their shows. But, which isn't usually a problem, but for some reason my mind is blank for a moment. So anyways.
Yes.
But yeah, last week Nintendo, there I go again. PlayStation had their State of Play, and we talked about that. And I kind of postulated that I didn't know at the time, but I kind of theorized, and turned out to later be right, that the reason why all the big companies were having their shows as of late was because the Summer Game Fest is on, and also took place last week, at least the big show specifically for that. And I won't go into the Summer Game Fest, but it's basically the big summer event for gaming where all the game companies reveal their stuff. It's kind of supplanted E3 in terms of things. Now E3's kind of gone by the wayside, but that's a whole other story. I'm so sad that E3's gone because it's just a tradition for games to be at E3 or just its existence, though in fairness, considering where E3 was going,
It
it's
was bound to kind of happen at the rate it was going.
yeah, it's bound to happen. It's sad to see it go because a tradition. I like traditions, but regardless, we're not here to talk about E3 or the big shows, or at least all the big shows. We're here to talk about one specifically. We're here to talk about Xbox's big show, or specifically one aspect of it, Starfield, because that is a massive piece that is deserving of its own video, and this is the video. So let's just dive right in. That was a long intro. Well, I don't know. Would you call that an intro, Justin? Or would you call that me giving expounding details?
Yes.
Helpful as always. So, anyways, um, moving on. Starfield. This is Xbox's latest big brainchild that they're calling the space game, in the words of the famous Todd Howard. And it's Xbox's, or not Xbox's, it's their newest IP, that being Bethesda's, new IP in what, 20 odd years? Their next new IP, I think. At least in terms of like big IP. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's their biggest new IP.
What, for Bethesda? Their biggest,
Yeah.
newest RP? I think it's just Starfield right now, yeah. Like,
I think I
that's,
remember.
that's their biggest new thing that they're
Well, I
working
mean, no,
on.
it's their biggest thing. But I think I remember hearing in the show where they're like, it's the first new IP in 20 years, and I'm like, is that true? I don't remember everything Bethesda's made.
I think
But
so.
then again, Bethesda is a subsect of another company, not Xbox, but another company. Uh, not Mojang, was it? Not Mojang. The one they did all their big stuff under, not Bethesda, but the company behind them before they got bought up by Xbox. Do you remember what that company was called, Justin?
Which company was bought up by Xbox before?
No, not the company. The one that owned, like, is technically the owner of Bethesda, the big one that has all the IPs outside
Oh, um, I want to
of.
say not Activision, but
No, definitely not.
yeah, I know what you're referring to, but I
They've
can't
got a
remember.
Yeah, that. I think that's why it's confusing me because technically, if you count Bethesda by itself, yes, it's their first new IP in 20 years, but they worked under a company prior to them being bought out by Xbox, and that was kind of, I don't want to say their parent company, but almost like their central core, which also owned a bunch of small studios in and of itself,
Pretty much.
which, had a lot of new IPs themselves. I believe id Software is also in there somewhere. But anyways. But yeah, Bethesda speaking specifically, strictly them, it is their first new IP in 20 years, considering that's where all Bethesda stuff generally is famous or perhaps infamous in the games business, but we'll get to that. But anyways, it's the next space game, or it's the big space game Bethesda's wanted to make for a while. Let's just do the math. Now they've got a post-apocalypse in Fallout. They've got a medieval fantasy thing with Elder Scrolls, and now they've got space with Starfield. Call me crazy, but I think they've covered all the bases.
I think so. I think
But
so.
but anyways, so yeah, Starfield. It's a thing. We've wanted to kind of see it more in depth for a while now. And I mean, we had a bit of an in-depth thing the last time they revealed stuff, but it was more of just like here's a guided walkthrough, I think, but it wasn't much in the way of details to what Starfield is. Now we're getting a deep dive into what Starfield is as a game. Not just from like here is, some stuff, but here's the development and here's our ideas and here's a release date,
Yeah.
which actually is a lot sooner than I thought. It's actually coming out, and I believe, checking notes. One moment, please. I'm literally looking at a pre-order thing for it now. That's why I'm saying that. September 1st. Yeah, I think that's 9/1. Well, 9/1 is September 1st, right? Yeah, I think that's September 1st. But anyways, yeah, so September 1st. Which again is a lot sooner than I thought. But then again, this game has been in development for several years now. I don't remember when they first revealed it, but I think it was at least 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, this game's been in development for a while, and well, it's interesting to say the least because Bethesda is, as we previously mentioned, kind of infamous for their games.
Yes.
Famous, but also infamous in equal measures. The last big game they put out, if you remember correctly, was Fallout 76, and
That went
well,
interestingly.
when interestingly, as dear Justin here can speak on first-hand experience, he actually has Fallout 76.
I
I
played
did
Fallout
not. But
76 pretty much the day it came out.
I debated about it, but I held off, and that was one of the few games I held off on. Surprisingly, turned out to be a very good choice on my part.
Yes.
But yeah, I even had people saying, "Why'd you play Fallout 76?" I'm like, I don't know, just not my thing. And it turns out that was a good thing because, well, why don't you walk them through some of the issues that came with that, won't
So,
you, Justin?
so besides base networking problems, which that's kind of what is going to end up happening with a Bethesda, or well, any kind of multiplayer-esque type game, is
Especially one as big as that.
yeah, networking problems.
Mm.
One of the other big problems that happened in 76 was overall kind of just user experience problems. So anything from the UI, base user mechanics, literally just walking around, a lot of things was buggy. And because of that, it made things very difficult to play. In other words, there one moment you could think you're fine, next moment you could either crash or be stuck in a weird void space and unable to do anything. So,
Mm.
yeah, there was a number of things that ended up happening, and
Indeed.
yeah,
Messy, messy, messy.
it was very
Oh,
messy.
and again, if you want to hear like more about 76 and its whole charade, internet
There's
historian, shout out
yeah,
to him, has a
there's like
beautiful
an
thing.
entire history of every little thing that happened during that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He's done a wonderful compilation of the nonsense that came from 76. So if you ever want to see the true breath of madness that came from 76 in the wake of its release, check out Internet Historian. Great content creator, been around for a while. And like I said, his video on the fall of 76, as he calls it. Again, beautiful. I've seen the video. Shout out to him. It's
He's very
really
good.
shows you just how messy that game was when it first released, as well as the subsequent years later. But regardless, so yeah, 76 was a mess. And again, as we said, Bethesda games are infamous and famous in equal measures, partially because they are, very successful. That's where their fame comes from. But infamous because, as Justin points out, they are also broken messes.
Yes.
Famously so. And in many ways, that's almost the charm of the games, weirdly enough. Like, I think there's a running line that everyone likes to say when it comes to Bethesda about, it's not a bug, it's a feature. That's where, that's basically, that
Just
came from
consume
Bethesda.
content. Consume and enjoy. Consume and enjoy content.
It's not just to consume, it's just don't ask questions about how broken it is.
Yeah, no, that's what the line is. Just consume content. Don't ask questions. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, not every bug that comes from a Bethesda game is a bad one. There
No.
are some bugs that are almost beloved because of how weird and how like stupid you can make the game is. Like one particular famous bug in Skyrim, for example, is having to do with the thief system, right? Or the stealing mechanic in the game. But here's the funny thing. Usually if you steal something in front of the NPC, obviously they'll see you, they'll call for the guards, and well, usually in Bethesda games, the guards in a town or village are immortal NPC characters, so don't bother trying to fight them. You'll lose regardless. Um, However, there is an interesting little quirk of the UI, possibly again, most likely a bug, that you can do to get around this. If you take a basket from just anywhere and place it on top of an NPC's head, literally just over top their head, and then steal something in front of them, they do not technically see this act because they did not see you stealing it.
Yes.
So you could rob an entire NPC blind with like their store, and they will just
Nobody will
go on.
really care all too much.
Nobody will really care, yeah. And that is just one of many bugs in particularly Skyrim. So, like I said, they're not always hated. Some can be quite funny and are kind of beloved for it. But again, that's where the line of "it's not a bug, it's a feature" came from. That should basically be their working motto as at Bethesda. Regardless, that's where a game like Starfield is quite interesting because, well, as we've known for a long time, as again Todd Howard said, it's their space game. But it's not just any space game, it's quite a large scope of a space game. Specifically speaking, the fact that, most of the time when people think space game, they think, okay, you'll be in space, obviously. You'll be
Yep.
going between maybe a few planets. There'll be a storyline on these, maybe a handful of planets, and that'll be the game. Inserts, genre shenanigans and theming shenanigans of,
Funny thing
obviously.
here.
Yeah, if it's a Star Wars game, it's going to involve the Force and lightsabers and Jedi somewhere along the line. And if it's, an exploration game, it'll probably involve survival or, stuff like that somewhere along the line. But the thing with Bethesda's Starfield is that it's on a much grander scope than most space games. I think 90% of space games ever try to achieve. What I mean by this is if you haven't heard, and again, if you haven't, I'm shocked, but I'll run it through you anyway. Basically, what Starfield is trying to do is that it's not just a handful of select planets on a galaxy map you're going through. It's many planets. Many, many planets. We don't have a hard number yet, but I believe that it might be like at least over 10, which doesn't sound very much, but again, I'm just spitballing numbers here. It's probably going to be a lot more because what they're doing is they're having an entire galaxy map and they're basically saying, here, go anywhere.
Yep.
Like Bethesda games generally are known for their massive scope, but the scope they're going for is akin to like No Man's Sky. Not as mega massive as No Man's Sky, I would hope at least, but somewhere in that general ballpark. If it's not just like 2 or 3 planets, it's like 10 or 20 or up. At least that's what I'm getting at least that's what back me up here, Justin. At least I think that's what I'm getting from Starfield. What about you?
Um.
At
Yeah, I
least in terms
can't
of scope.
100% say for sure on that because yeah, like it kind of seems like you're only getting a handful of planets, but you're not 100% sure on it.
That's the thing, right? It feels like it's a much bigger scope where it's just like, okay, we'll go here, 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 here. Like, I don't know. It just feels on a much bigger scope. The planets themselves also feel very massive.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just No Man's Sky where you go to a planet and it's just an empty rock, though. By the sounds of it, that will be some planets like that. But so yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that goes out because, like I said, the last game tried to go with big scope planet-wise was No Man's Sky, and at least I think it was No Man's Sky. Yeah, I think it was No Man's Sky that the last big game that tried to go for a massive space scope. And well, at launch we saw how that happened. That's another infamous game, but again, story for another day.
Yep.
But yeah, and that's just factoring in the scope. One of the interesting parts about No Man's Sky as well is that instead of giving you a ship as most space games do, you'll either get the chance to buy a ship or 90% of space games you'll just be given a ship, a, stock ship from the game. Bethesda, being Bethesda, said, yeah, no, we're just going to let you build your ship from parts. So remember the creation system from Fallout 4, which basically allowed you to
The
build
creation,
stuff? And
or the settlement system.
yeah, the settlement system, my mistake. Yeah, it's coming back in Starfield, and it's coming back with a vengeance. Don't get me wrong, and it's not just ships either. You'll even be able to build entire settlements on planets, which they're calling outposts, which you can do things like research and a bunch of stuff there. I imagine that might be useful for, mining resources.
Yeah, yeah.
But the idea of building your own ship, like, because again, it's basically the settlement system from Fallout. It's the creation system from Fallout 4, essentially, where you basically take blocks that they prefabricated with interiors and stuff like that, and you stick them together, or you take walls and you stick them together. But in the case of ships, I believe it's mostly blocks, and it looks like this is more of a modular-based system than what the settlement system was, which was a more wall-by-wall system.
Yeah. It was more of just a place item down type system.
Yeah. Which, in a way, is a bit better, I confess, because I didn't like the idea too much of like sitting there and, you know, making each section of the wall and then making each section of the other wall, building a roof and building out the interior. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were some people who were into that, specifically anyone who's a fan of Minecraft, but I am not. So the idea of just being able to place down modules and then potentially fill them with stuff is a lot better, a lot quicker. But again, I'm kind of interested to see what ships come out of the Creation Club or Creation Club, to see what come out of this creation system.
Yep.
Because when you give a person the ability to just make whatever they want as a ship, oh, I can imagine what comes out of that.
There's a
I can
lot of
imagine there's going to be some.
possibilities.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I imagine there's going to be some great ships that kind of come out of it too. Just like how when you look at some settlements in Fallout 4 that some people like show off, they're really massive and really well done.
Like the really crazy fancy stuff that you can do.
Yeah, like there's some crazy fancy stuff people do, and it's impressive. Don't get me wrong. And I imagine with Starfield it's going to be the same. Like I can imagine people like building like Star Citizen-esque ships in terms of like how massive they are in terms of
Yeah,
interior.
depending on like what kind of scope you can have with your buildings and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, speaking of Star Citizen, that's an interesting point to bring up. Starfield is interesting in that basically what it's trying to do in terms of when you take out the story part is basically what Star Citizen has been trying to do since who knows how long at this point. But they've actually managed to do it. Like they say like this game is going to be all about choice. Like it's not just going to be like, hey, go here, shoot this guy, move on, shoot this guy, move on. You can talk your way out of situations, you can sneak through areas, you can, you know, not sure how much of the sneaking aspect will be, but but it is interesting to kind of like see that realization of the thing Star Citizen has been promising for who knows how long.
Yeah.
I believe the exact words when it comes to the design of this game is NASA punk, if memory serves, what they're calling it. So, for those who don't know what the heck that means, congratulations. You're basically like everyone else.
You're
I
safe.
did not know. You're safe, don't worry. You're not like in an odd category. Nobody knows, because I believe they invented this term. Basically, what it means is that you have the basically what they're looking for when it comes to ship design, as well as just the technology of Starfield in general, is that generally when you think of space games, you'll think of one of two things. You'll either think hyper advanced sleekness, or you'll think of like rudimentary boxy stuff. So between the categories of almost rustic and high tech. So think the stuff you see in Star Trek versus the stuff you see in, I don't know, Star Wars.
Yeah. Different levels
NAS,
of tech type stuff.
yeah, different levels of tech in their sleekness. What we're looking at in Starfield is more along the lines of the Star Wars side. So the NASA punk is again referring to the idea that a lot of the tech looks like it could come from NASA. It's big, it's bulky. It's not like the new stuff that they're doing with space nowadays. It's more of like the stuff you'd see in like the space race of the 60s, where suits may be on the bulkier side and technology is incredibly thick and, white everywhere. So it's got that kind of like boxy old feel to it. I don't, well, maybe not old feel, but it's got that durable look to it.
Yeah.
And then the punk aspect is, I'm not sure how the hell they describe the punk aspect. So forgive me, I can't remember that part. But again, the NASA part is basically just, or should I say, the punk stuff is your usual punkish stuff. But yeah. So the technology is kind of interesting in Starfield. It's certainly unique looking compared to most other space games. Though, if I may mention, when it comes to the technology, like, or perhaps I should say the UI of the game. Well, no, the technology itself is interesting. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see what kind of stuff comes out of this, because compared to things like in Star Citizen, where you have to buy your ships specifically and you can't customize them, they just come as is. And don't get me wrong, I've seen some videos that go through like the interiors of the ships from Star Citizen, and like even architects themselves will like go through them within these videos. They are very, very nice interiors, especially like the high end, like classy ships. Because of why I brought up the NASA Punk was specifically because of like I compare it to Star Citizen, but don't expect to build like a luxury liner here. It's still going to be something akin to a freighter fighter thing. Like you're not going to have like nice sleek interior walls, at least not from what I can see.
Not entirely, yeah.
So there will be some limits to what people can do when it comes to like styling, but who knows? Maybe with some mods that will get fixed. I can already see the mod community salivating over this game.
Oh yeah.
But again, it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. My mind just went blank and forgot where I was going with this. That is not a good sign. Oh my god, where was I going with this? It's not a great sign to admit. Again, we do these shows live, so not like we
Yes.
have a script we're going off of.
I mean, we could have a script, but that, yeah.
Well, we could have a script, but we choose not to for the sake of authenticity.
Yes.
I always like to think that gives us an air of, again, authenticity, which you don't always get from a lot of YouTubers. It feels very sometimes scripted. And like I said, you can safely say that this show is not scripted, so everything we say is off the cuff, and sometimes it can
It
result in
it,
situations
it,
like
it
this,
ends
which are
up
really stupid.
being weird, ends up being rambly, but it's fine.
He mentions rambly. What he means is specifically I ramble. Specifically. But regardless. But yeah. Oh my goodness, that's gonna annoy me now. When you ever had that moment, Justin, where you'll have a thought, you're going into it, you're explaining the context before you get into the actual thought,
And
and
then you
then you get to
forget.
the moment you're gonna explain the thought, and you forget what the hell the thought was.
Pretty much. It do be
I
like
have
that.
that on I have that on this show this sometimes, and it's so weird because I'm sitting here going, and about that thing. Yeah, that thing. It's a wonderful thing. And I'm just kind of left at the end. It's like you're writing a script in your head of what you're gonna say, and then you just suddenly stop, and you're like, where do I go from here? Oh well. Oh well. I'll just go into the UI portion. That's where I was going. So, interestingly enough, I made this joke ever since they showed off the UI in the game, which again has this nasty feel to it. It's not very hyper advanced and sleek. It's, you know, very. It reminds me almost like NS-DOS in like its basicness, or not. Maybe not as NS-DOS, but you know, very much like almost like a command prompt line. No, actually, you know what it reminds me of, and this is what I always say. It reminds me of the UI the technology and like the kind of menu system you'll see in the Alien franchise. Like if anyone looks at like the technology you see in the Alien movies and like the writing like they have for like the like on the technology, and this even implies like if you want a good example of this, play like Alien Isolation. They nailed the design, specifically the UI, like you'll see in Alien perfectly in that game. It exactly reminds me of that, like of the Alien franchise and of Alien Isolation. So the fact that this game uses this kind of menu style is almost going to increase my paranoia while playing the game, because I'm gonna constantly be looking over my shoulder for a xenomorph.
Pretty much.
And the fact that it's in space does not help one bit, like I said. So, you know, whatever. That's my little soapbox topic that I wanted to bring up.
There you go.
But like I said, the most interesting part will be what bugs come out of this. Like, what do you think it'll be like on launch day, Justin? Because like I said, the last game from Bethesda wasn't exactly a thriller. How do you
Hmm.
think this will shake out?
Hmm.
I know it's an
See,
understatement there.
see, here's the thing. 76 had a lot of what one would say promise at first when you saw gameplay, but in reality, it was not. And if this game has any kind of networking, multiple player based gameplay, hmm,
Here's the thing, right? I agree to a point where, like, I understand why 76 failed.
yeah,
Like, when you look at the history behind the game's development and everything else, it was painted on the wall that it was going to fail. It was ambitious, but it was an ambitious in a way of like they've never done this before. This is a completely out of left field thing.
yes.
Like
Well,
if they
not
made
entirely.
76s,
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. For the most part, and people are
Mhm.
right about this when they say it, 76 is just Fallout 4 with a bunch of multiplayer patched in. It wasn't entirely planned out with how they went about implementing the multiplayer, and because of that, that's why so many bugs happened. If they had a little more time with it and a little more bug testing, well, not really bug testing, but like kind of like user testing type thing where they brought people in for like some stress testing, maybe it'd be fine. But I would be willing to bet part of the problem was just the overall networking scope, and they weren't really prepared for it, and
we
because of that, the game suffered even more.
we have to remember it's not just a case of networking problems,
No,
right? It
no,
was
but it
also a
did
case of
did play a
content
role.
problems.
Yeah, it did play
Without
a
a
role.
doubt.
Well,
Without a doubt, don't get me wrong. But it was
well,
also the fact of content. Like the world felt empty because there was no NPCs at first, which was quite
Well,
famous.
yes and no. The world had a lot to do. It's just it felt very empty because of what Bethesda thought was a good idea, which was replace all the NPCs with robots and make the world seem like it died and you are in fact rebuilding. And because
Yeah.
of that, it yes suffered a lot because of it.
It it was basically Bethesda trying to make an MMO, which they have done kind of in the past with Elder Scrolls Online, which didn't go over that poorly. But here's the thing: they've done it in a very different way. Elder Scrolls is your more traditional MMO style, so it's not like they have no experience with doing stuff like that.
No.
But what they tried to do with 76 is they tried to almost reinvent the wheel when it comes to MMOs. Like you said, they kind of tried to replace all the NPCs with robots, or just in general with no NPCs mostly.
Yeah.
And they tried to have like, you know, basically the players make their own stuff. But here's the thing, that didn't really shake out that well,
No.
because at the end of the day it just kind of felt eh. They've added more content as time has gone on. In fact, in the Xbox showcase itself, funny enough, they also mentioned 76 and how they were bringing Atlantic City back, which you and I had a conversation about that prior, and how you said apparently that's also recycled content.
Well, I
I did not
don't
know
know
that.
if it's recycled content. All I know is it's very well likely a recycled idea.
Hmm.
See, here's the thing. Fallout 4 originally was going to have a underwater city-esque type thing going on, but that got scrapped. And because of that, that's why I go and say at the very least it is a recycled idea.
Hmm. So we will see how it shakes out. They didn't really give much specifics in their kind of reveal for Atlantic City update because again, it was in the traditional Fallout 90s or 60s commercial style, which I find quaint, but it doesn't really give you much in the way of details as to what the heck it's actually going to look like. But we will see. But because of the game being what it was, like I said, they didn't really have much experience when it came to like multiplayer MMOs outside of Elder Scrolls, which was a success, but in the way they tried to do 76 was in itself reinventing the wheel of multiplayer. So I think they had no real, I don't want to say right, but they had no real knowledge of how the hell they were going to do that.
How they were going to go about it and everything, yeah.
Yeah, and it showed in the end product. I'm more confident when it comes to Starfield because Starfield itself is a single player game. It's marketed as a single player story game, again, akin to Elder Scrolls, akin to Fallout, the actual Fallout games, not 76. There is multiplayer. Don't get me wrong. I think I'm saying a lot of I thinks because with this game, there's always a gray area here.
Don't
I
know for
think there
sure.
is. Yeah, I think there is co-op. I think, but I might be wrong on that one. But to my knowledge, that's where the multiplayer ends. There is co-op potentially, but that's it. Everything else is a single player experience. So I'm much more confident that this game will be a lot better than 76 because, like I said, this is much more familiar territory for Bethesda than, a left field MMO game where players make their own stuff. Or players make their own world, essentially. And unlike 76, which, in retrospect had murmurings and rumors about, temporal development and this and that, from what we've heard so far, there hasn't been any issues with Starfield so far.
So
But then
far.
again, all the stuff that tends to come out with development hell and da 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 tends to come out retroactively, so we will see. But like I said, I'm more confident with Starfield than 76 for that reason, which is why I probably will be playing it. Like, I'm pretty sure it won't go what 76 did and potentially brick some people's consoles, because I do remember there was a bug for that as well. Where some people's
Yes.
consoles just got bricked because of it.
Completely botched.
Hmm. But again, if you want to see the story behind 76, again, check out Internet Historian or any of the other people who talk about it. There are glitch compilations online they go into the hours. Like, that is just how many of them there were. Not sure how many of them there are today, but
Yeah.
I imagine there's probably still a lot of them there. So we will see. Overall, Starfield has proven to be an interesting game. It's proven to be, like I said, it's kind of what Star Citizen has always promised realized, with almost a hint of the exploration aspect of Mass Effect Andromeda thrown in. But instead of exploring a new galaxy like you do in Andromeda, it's exploring a known galaxy for a mysterious MacGuffin, of which I do not know the specifics because they do not tell us the
Mystery
specifics.
item.
Mystery item, and you're part of this like explorers association, so that's cool, I guess.
Yep.
Mhm. But otherwise, what do you think about Starfield in general, Justin? Like,
Um, it's very interesting because it is something that a lot of people enjoy, and it's something a lot of communities want, especially communities that enjoy the whole making your own ship or kind of exploring the galaxy type thing. So this is definitely something a lot of people have been wanting. It's just my hope that it gets executed in a nice enough way.
Yeah. Again, I'm more confident with this one than I was with 76 because, again, familiar territory for them.
Yeah.
Again, when you look at this game, you certainly see hints of, again, Mass Effect. You, at least in terms of like almost the plot, you see hints of Star Citizen in terms of, the type of game you've got. You see hints of No Man's Sky in terms of like the scope you're going for. I at least see that's what they're hinting to.
Yeah.
So you get a bunch of different space games in terms of feel. You get Alien from the frickin' UI, but that's beside the point.
Don't worry
I
about it. You're not going to
Bethesda,
die.
if you ever hear this, I almost want you because you did this now to have a crossover with the Alien franchise. Make it happen. Run into like the xenomorphs on some planet, or hell, add Wayland Yutani in the game. Actually, don't do that. That would be bad. Don't add the evil corporation into a game. I think that just goes without saying, because that would probably be well, actually, probably interesting storylines could possibly come out of that. But anyways, get like the androids from the Alien movies as a companion. Why not? But anyways, yeah, that's Star Citizen in a nutshell.
Pretty much.
Interestingly enough, they revealed their collector's edition at their direct event, and it's an interesting collector's edition. Not gonna lie, most collector's editions are some form of statue, a case, and some bonus exclusive content. Da, 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 da. This one's interesting in that it's a watch, a digital watch.
Yes. So think similar to that of the Pip-Boy. Actually,
Pretty much.
it's exactly like the Pip-Boy in 76, only it's an actual functional thing.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a Pit Boy, effectively, in terms of both in-game and in real life. But it actually works, again, in both real game and in life. Though, in fairness, the Pit Boy in Fallout also works, but the Pit Boys in Fallout, much like everything in Fallout, is 6 times thicker than it actually needs to be. Like, the technology in Fallout doubles as both regular technology and weapon because of how massive it is.
Yes.
And this is an actual watch, so, it'll be nice to walk around with something on your hand that doesn't cover half your arm, but whatever. And it is a nice watch, don't get me wrong. It is, like I said, a digital watch. Well, perhaps digital is not the word I should go for. It is a smartwatch. That's the word I'm looking for here. At least by the looks of it. Because they did mention that it'll connect to your phone, so I'm guessing it's a smartwatch of some kind. And actually, the game itself, like, there are some collector's editions, weirdly enough, that do not come with the physical game. I know how stupid that sounds. You buy a collector's edition and you expect to get the game. But some collector's editions, for some reason, do not.
Yep.
I think Activision's pulled this a few times, but that's beside the point. This one does have the game inside it, but is a digital code. So buyer be warned if you are buying this expensive, what they're calling Constellation Edition, not the Collector's Edition, Constellation Edition. You will not be able to actually acquire the physical game case. You will acquire a digital code to get the game. So, that's something to be aware of. But nonetheless, it is an interesting collector's edition. They also showed off the case the watch comes in. Surprisingly beefy case, too, with, like, actual locking system. Steelbook, as well as up to 5 days early access. Now, and apparently there's also a first story expansion planned, but that'll be a side point from later. What interests me most about this collector's edition, or possibly any other edition, because I haven't... Here's the thing. The reason this is probably still on the market, and I was actually looking at it, like, I'm still looking at it as we speak. Like, I was looking at it before the show, because me and Justin were actually wagering how expensive it would be. And I, obviously, being a guy who buys collector's editions for other stuff, I have the collector's edition for Destiny, to vanilla Destiny, Lightfall, Cyberpunk, the old Star Wars, Old Republic MMO. I buy several collector's editions, so I generally know what prices they're going for. Generally speaking, they go for several $100, generally.
About, yeah.
Depending on what you're looking for, some collector's editions can be overpriced and go for like $400, $500. Some collector's editions can go for only $200, $300. Depending on the collector's edition will depend on the price, the content, and if that price is justifiable. Like, don't get me wrong, some collector's editions are very much worth the price in terms of like what they give you. Like, again, the Cyberpunk one was $200, $300, and it came with a statue that is literally like half my leg in terms of like size. So, pretty sizable, and it makes sense. And it's a very nice detailed statue. This one is $399 Canadian. I'm not sure what it is with conversion with the US and every other market. So I'm surprised. I thought that it would be more expensive, factoring in the watch. But then again, considering in this Constellation Edition you're only really getting the early access, which frankly there is no price tag on an early access build of the game. It's 5 days early access, which I'll get to that, but there's really no price tag you can get on early access. You're just letting in people early, so it's not like you have to do more work there. First story expansion, so okay, a bit of interesting stuff. Skin pack, okay. The soundtrack and art book, okay. A patch, a steelbook, and the watch case and the watch itself. And a digital game download. Most of the money there is probably in the watch itself and the case. That's my guess. Because I'm thinking with a watch, especially a smartwatch, presumably, that would be at least, $200 by itself. And, maybe I'm right, because like I said, it is $300. Well, 400 technically.
So, yeah.
So, again, maybe they saved money on the fact they don't, give you as much stuff. Would I say this is worth it? I don't know. Depends on how much you like watches. I'm probably maybe going to get it if I get the money, because I don't wear too many watches, but I certainly am a collector. As I said, I collect collector's editions, and I might get more use out of a watch than I do a statue. And to my knowledge, there really is no other addition to Starfield as of right now than these two editions. Like, it's either you get the base game or you get the Constellation Edition. To my knowledge at this point. Hold on.
So there's that.
Yeah, it looks like there's only those two editions, so it's either collectors or basic. So it's it's nice in a way that we're having a much more simpler system, especially compared to Ubisoft, who with every game they have is like basic, ultimate, deluxe, and that's just the game itself, not even factoring in any possible collector's edition that might come out of that. And other games, especially like I think Activision again has done some of this, where you need a freaking like spreadsheet to figure out the different editions and what they're worth and what you're getting. So again, it's nice to have only a game with one edition, or two in this case, just basic and collectors.
Yep.
What interests me most, like I said, is the 5 days early access. Bethesda games are normally buggy, as we've covered extensively throughout the course of this episode. And that's on release, official release. 5 days early access? Oh, I can't wait to see what'll come of that. I almost want to buy this exclusively for that, just so I can see how broken the game is by the time I get it when I do get it 5 days early. Because again, there's always the day one patch which comes out, because with game development,
Something
how it'll work.
happened.
Yeah, there's always game development, so they'll work on the game to a point, then they'll send it out to print the discs, and then they'll go release it, and once the discs are printed, they're technically a few versions of the game behind. So the day one patch is actually what they've worked up until that point of the game's release. So generally things like a lot of bug fixes come from the day one patch, and historically speaking, there are some day one patches that are as big as the game itself. Funny enough, I think Fallout 76 was exactly like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but I think the day one patch was as big as the game itself, if not at just
About,
about
yep.
half. So, on that note, can you imagine what happened before the day one patch? Like, what was Fallout 76 like prior to the day one patch? Good
Messy,
God.
messy, buggy, buggy.
You just boot it up and the computer just short circuits. But again, like I said, so 5 days early will mean you'll have to wait 5 days till the game officially comes out. And for most people who play the game early, that's not a big deal. But like I said, remember, technically you won't get that day one patch until the game officially releases 5 days later. So who knows? You might get to experience a version of Starfield that's even more buggy than what you would normally expect from it and what should normally come from that game.
Why not?
Ah, why not?
Why not?
We were actually talking about this during the show. I want it so I can actually hyperdrive my way through a planet. Come on, let's pull a Star Wars.
We got this.
That'll be my first activity I do in the game. Point at a planet, hyperdrive straight into it. Let's see how many pieces I wind up in. Hey, if it worked for Star Wars.
If it worked, it worked.
It worked, it worked.
But yeah, there you go. That's for the most part kind of what you're gonna be looking forward to and on it.
Yeah, that's pretty much Starfield in a nutshell. We've covered basically everything from the additions to our opinions on it to Bethesda's previous works to
Like
the
I
possibility.
have high hopes for it, but there's a good chance that something might go
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, there is high hopes for this game. Like I said, I'm personally more optimistic about this game than I was about 76 because again, it's much more well-charted territory for them. Plus, there's also one other thing you have to consider. Nowadays, Xbox owns Microsoft, or Xbox owns Bethesda. So they've got a lot of money behind them, and they've presumably got maybe better management behind them because Xbox generally is more trustworthy than Bethesda when it comes to the consistency of the quality of their releases. For the most part, not Redfield aside, but
Yep.
generally they're more consistent. So actually, that's a good point to raise as a final note. This will be the first game that Bethesda releases, that Bethesda releases under Microsoft's management. So I'm interested to see how this shakes out. This will be our first taste at what the management under Microsoft was like at Bethesda, I suppose.
Yep.
Maybe things have improved.
Perhaps.
Who am I kidding? It'll still be a buggy mess.
Let's be honest here. I don't know when exactly you said it, but at some point you've said everything nowadays tends to get released as a buggy mess.
Yeah, everything at some point gets released as a buggy mess. That's the state of the gaming industry as we are right now. Really shouldn't be, but it is. Oh well.
What can you do?
What can you do? Remember when they just had day one patches and that was it? And then what was it the Nintendo, one of the big heads at Nintendo who's now retired and I think also dead, said once, a delayed game is eventually good, a bad game is bad forever. Where it's like, that was a saying that came from before the days of day one patches, before internet became a big thing on consoles. So you had to get it right the first time you released a game, or there was no fixing it. The bugs in the game were just forever in the game. Then came day one patches, and that was like, oh my god, we can fix our problems now. And it's just devolved into this mess where it's like they don't even try to fix the problems anymore because they rely on the patches too much. There's over dependence these days. Ugh, almost makes me wish you could go back to the days when there wasn't day one patches or patches in general. That way they'd have to freaking get it right the first time, or as good as they can. Or in Bethesda's case, release whatever they have and just say F it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, whatever.
What can
Actually,
you
remind
do
me.
on that?
Hmm. Actually, remind me. You played the hell out of New Vegas. That was, I think, before the day one patches for the most part. Oh.
I don't know what it was like before day one patch, and for the most
Hmm.
part, it was during the disc era.
Oh.
So there wasn't particularly a day one patch until later on, type thing. But on
Yeah.
its initial release, I would say it was pretty good. For the most part, compared to Fallout 3,
Then again, it was
'76 is a
Obsidian,
very
so.
more stable game. Like 70 or not 76. Fallout New Vegas is a more stable game than Fallout 3.
Then again, I am kind of comparing apples to oranges here because that was made by Obsidian, so.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Fallout is their baby, so of course they were gonna go and be as careful and good with it as possible.
True, true, true. I'm kind of curious to see what Bethesda games were like though before day one patches. If they were like this now, good god.
Well, in a way,
Who
they've
knows?
always had problems with their games. It's just it's been increasing because apparently developers are okay with letting things slide a little too much.
Again, it might be that overdependence on day one patches I previously mentioned. Maybe that's what caused Bethesda to become what they are now.
Yeah,
Neglected and
just
then there.
neglect it. It'll be fine. We'll fix it instead of just working on it before releasing it.
Yeah, and then we get, Fallout 76. Yeah, there's that mess. But anyways, I think that was the pinnacle of Fallout mess and just Bethesda mess in general. But I digress. So yeah, that's Starfield. That's what we think of it. That's
Yep.
where we stand. Again, I believe comes out September 1st. So mark your calendars if you're looking forward to it. I certainly will be.
That's
It'll be
when the class season begins, ladies and gentlemen. So keep that in mind. Summer ends, games come out, but school and work never ends.
and may I just say, what the hell is wrong with you? Why'd you have to bring that up?
Well, it is something that must be said. I am sorry.
Not
It is.
by you, no. Not by, I would contradict. Not by you.
Ah,
It's still the middle to beginning of summer. Wait a month or two, then we can have this conversation.
yes, well, still.
I'm still in my vacation mode. Ugh.
Well, that
Anyways,
didn't say summer was over.
yeah, but you had to remind me of work.
Yes, well, still.
Yeah. Anyways, look what you've done. No, regardless,
My summer is
think
now
on what.
ruined.
Yeah, my summer's now ruined. Look at what you've done.
I have 2 more months, but it's fine. It's ruined.
Look at what you've done. Anyways,
Well,
we will
hopefully
leave it
you
at
all
that.
enjoyed.
Yep, hopefully you all enjoyed. We were originally going to do a kind of mixed video between Xbox's Starfield stuff and Ubisoft stuff, because
But
Ubisoft did their
this is
presentation the next
already
day.
very long as it is, so.
You can clearly tell he's saying for me to shut up. I'm reading between the lines here. I just refuse to acknowledge it. But, yeah, no, we were originally going to do a mixture between Ubisoft stuff and Starfield stuff, but we figured Starfield deserved its own video, so it got its own video.
And for the most part, like I said earlier, it is something that a lot of people do want. So we'll see where it goes with that. Hopefully, the build up is well deserved, and the delivery is perfect, as much as it can be.
It's a Bethesda game. Let's
So,
be frank.
yes.
But anyways, so yeah, September 1st, mark your calendars. That's Starfield.
There you go.
And with that, I say good night.
Have a good one, ladies
Afternoon.
and gentlemen. We will see you next week for more news.
Never do that again.
Well, you have to try to get an identity at some point.
Yeah, but you don't need to go cheesy 60s broadcaster.
Don't worry about it. We'll go there someday.
Oh, good God. Anyways, have a good week, everybody.